Did you know that in 2025, India's rise on the global stage is sending shockwaves through the capitals of 8 powerful nations? From its booming economy to its military might and diplomatic finesse, India is no longer just a regional player. It's a global powerhouse that's quietly unsettling some of the world's biggest players. Stick around until the end, because the #1 country on this list will absolutely shock you. In this video, we're diving into the reasons why these nations are secretly terrified of India's unstoppable ascent in 2025, backed by the latest geopolitical updates and hard-hitting facts. Let's unravel the intrigue and explore what makes India such a formidable force. First up, let's talk about Pakistan, India's long-standing rival. The tension between these two nuclear-armed neighbors escalated dramatically in 2025 after a terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir on April 22 killed 26 civilians, prompting India to launch Operation Sindoor, a series of strikes targeting militant infrastructure in Pakistan. India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, which governed shared river resources, sent alarm bells ringing in Islamabad, with Pakistan declaring any water flow disruption an act of war. Pakistan's fear stems from India's growing military capabilities and its willingness to take bold actions, like the 2019 Balakot strikes, which showcased India's readiness to retaliate decisively. Add to that India's deepening ties with the United States and Japan, which refused to fully back Pakistan diplomatically during the May 2025 clashes. Pakistan is rattled by India's ability to isolate it on the global stage while flexing its economic and military muscle, making it clear that India holds the upper hand in this volatile rivalry. Next, we have China, India's biggest strategic challenge. In 2025, China is increasingly wary of India's rapid rise as a manufacturing hub, especially as global supply chains shift away from Beijing due to US-led trade tensions. India's economic growth, projected to hit 7 to 8% by 2032, is bolstered by reforms boosting its manufacturing sector from 12% to 20% of GDP. This economic surge, combined with India's increased defense budget up from 1.9% to 2.5% of GDP, is turning India into a military powerhouse, directly threatening China's regional dominance. The 2024 India-China border agreement may have set temporary guardrails, but China is uneasy about India's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific, especially through the Quad India, US, Japan, Australia. India's infrastructure contributions to maritime security in the South China Sea, alongside Japan, are seen as a direct counter to China's ambitions. Beijing's resentment is palpable, as it views India as a rival that could challenge its "two tigers cannot inhabit one mountain" philosophy. Moving on to Maldives, a small but strategically vital Indian Ocean nation. In 2025, the Maldives is grappling with its pro-China government's India Out campaign, which led to the expulsion of Indian military personnel and the termination of a water survey pact. However, India's dominance in the Indian Ocean, bolstered by its anti-piracy naval deployments and growing influence in regional forums like the I2U2 India, Israel, UAE, USA, has left the Maldives feeling vulnerable. The Maldives relies heavily on India for economic and security support, and its pivot toward China has strained ties, raising fears of economic retaliation or diplomatic isolation. India's ability to project power in the region, coupled with its Chabahar port development in Iran, makes the Maldives nervous about being caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war it can't win. Bangladesh is next, and its position is precarious after the fall of the pro-India Awami League government in August 2024. The new transitional administration, wary of India's support for ousted leader Sheikh Hasina, is tilting toward China to counterbalance India's influence. The 2025 India-Pakistan crisis further complicated Bangladesh's stance, as anti-India sentiment grows among its nationalist and Islamist groups. India's regional leadership, backed by its role in the Quad and its economic clout, puts pressure on Bangladesh to align more closely with New Delhi or risk losing economic benefits. Bangladesh fears India's ability to sway smaller neighbors and its potential to influence domestic politics, especially as India strengthens ties with the US, which views India as a cornerstone of its Indo-Pacific strategy. Now, let's look at Sri Lanka, another South Asian neighbor feeling the heat of India's geopolitical rise. In 2025, Sri Lanka is navigating a delicate balance between India and China, with the latter making significant inroads through infrastructure investments. India's assertive foreign policy, including its anti-piracy operations in the Indian Ocean and its growing economic partnerships with the West, puts Sri Lanka in a bind. Colombo fears India's ability to leverage its economic aid and diplomatic influence to counter Chinese presence, especially after India's successful G20 presidency in 2023 showcased its global leadership. Sri Lanka's economic vulnerabilities make it wary of antagonizing India, which could withhold critical support in times of crisis. Nepal, a landlocked nation heavily dependent on India for trade and energy, is also uneasy about India's growing clout. In 2025, Nepal is balancing its ties with India and China, with the latter investing heavily in infrastructure projects. India's multi-alignment strategy, maintaining strong ties with both the US and Russia, gives it leverage to influence Nepal's foreign policy. Kathmandu fears India's potential to exert economic pressure, especially given India's control over key trade routes. The 2025 geopolitical landscape, marked by India's hosting of the Quad Summit and its deepening defense ties with the US, makes Nepal wary of being sidelined if it leans too heavily toward China. Canada makes the list due to strained relations following allegations of Indian involvement in the 2023 assassination of a Sikh Canadian national. In 2025, the resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offers a potential reset, but Canada remains cautious about India's assertive foreign policy and its growing global influence. India's muted response to Western concerns about its democratic backsliding, combined with its strategic importance as a counterweight to China, makes Canada nervous about pushing too hard on human rights issues. Ottawa fears India's ability to brush off criticism while deepening ties with the US, leaving Canada diplomatically isolated in its disputes with New Delhi. Finally, the number one country secretly terrified of India in 2025 is Russia. Shocked? Here's why. India's multi-alignment strategy has allowed it to maintain warm ties with Moscow while strengthening partnerships with the West. Particularly the US. The 22nd India-Russia Summit in 2024 highlighted trade and cooperation agreements, but Russia is increasingly uneasy about India's growing independence. India's oil purchases from Russia during the Ukraine conflict strained relations with Western allies, yet India's ability to balance both sides showcases its diplomatic finesse. With Putin's planned visit to India in 2025 and India hosting the Quad Summit, Russia fears losing its long-standing strategic partner to Western influence. India's rising military capabilities, including its S-400 missile system acquisitions, and its economic growth make it a wildcard that Moscow can't fully predict or control. In conclusion, India's meteoric rise in 2025, fueled by economic reforms, military modernization, and a savvy multi-alignment foreign policy, has put these 8 nations on edge. From regional rivals like Pakistan and China to smaller neighbors like Maldives and Bangladesh, and even distant powers like Canada and Russia, India's influence is reshaping the global order. Its ability to navigate complex geopolitical dynamics while asserting its strategic autonomy makes it a force to be reckoned with. What do you think about India's rise? Which country's reaction surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into global affairs.